May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul and enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. On one of the Sundays in September, Jim spoke on fairness and asked the question, is every life of equal value? He said that when Jesus spoke about the kingdom, as he did, especially in the parable of the vineyard, he said that everyone was treated fairly, whatever their life situation. You may remember that in the parable of the vineyard, the landowner goes out at various times of the day to hire day laborers. But at the end of the day, he pays everyone the same wage, no matter how long they had worked. Jim said that this fair and equitable treatment was at the center of our faith, but the exact opposite of how our society operates. At the Holy Conversations the following Wednesday, I was waxing eloquently about the wisdom of Jim's observations, when Jim Taylor responded that he was going to be interested in seeing how I responded to the parable of the talents, which was the lectionary lesson that we just heard this morning. It was the lesson for today. And I hadn't decided up to that point whether I would use the lectionary lesson or find something else to preach about. But of course, once Jim issued that challenge to me, I had to respond. He's correct.
I'm listening.
Good. There, he's awake too. Doing well. And he's correct. In this parable, when we're talking about talents, the master does not treat his servants equally, but bestows far different and disproportionate talents on them. Of course, in the parable, the talent that's being referred to is money. The master is giving his servants money to invest. A lot of money to invest. In the original translations, they're called talents. The newer translation said gold coins, but a talent was worth about 10,000 shekels, and a shekel was the normal coin of transaction in Jesus' times, and a few shekels a day was the normal wage that people would receive if they received a wage. But here were these servants being given 10,000 shekels in one talent, and one got 10,000, one 5,000. A talent, just to put it in context that we can understand it, talent would be the equivalent today of between $1,600 and $1,900 US dollars. So that's what they were given to invest. The master was generous and even lavish in the distribution of talents, but he wasn't equitable. They got quite different talents, amounts of talents. And that shouldn't be a surprise to us either. We are reminded each day, all of us, about the inequitable distribution of talents that we have. Whatever our talents and gifts may be, we can easily identify many others who are far more gifted than we are. But in the parable of the talents, if the distribution is unequal, so is the responsibility for using them. When the master returns and calls on the servants to report their actions, he doesn't judge them against each other, but rather he judges them according to the talents they were given. The third servant isn't condemned because he didn't do as well as the first servant. Rather, he's condemned because he didn't use his talents at all. He buried them and returned them to the master unused. Again, I don't think that outcome should be a surprise to us. We are reminded every day that those who are very gifted and talented are called on to use their talents wisely for the good of all. At least we were reminded of that. But it seems to me that in our society, the parallels between the values of the parable and the values of society are breaking down. And there's a lot of anger and disappointment based not on the inequity of the gifts that people have been given, but on the inequity of the rewards that they expect for their gifts. I heard a report this week about a minor hockey team in Kimberley who had been offered $7.5 million as a gift by an enthusiastic fan. Apparently, this fan had won a lottery, a European lottery, and so he wanted to use some of the money to reward his favorite hockey team. $7.5 million. Though the sum would have been a normal salary for many NHL players, it was seen as a huge windfall to this Kootenay junior hockey team, which operates on a shoestring, mostly run entirely by volunteers. One NHL player's salary, a windfall to a whole junior team. That it doesn't seem fair is obvious. The irony is that the donor hasn't been heard from since he first made the offer. One of the things that I keep on thinking about is the story that came out of the bankruptcy proceedings of Sears Canada. It was of a new president of the company about a decade ago. I'm not sure how long ago, but he was made the new president of Sears and was given the chore of trying to sort of bring up the value of the company, which was already beginning to sort of look a little iffy as a company that could survive. And he decided that he needed to get some cash to spruce up some of the stores because a lot of them were beginning to look a little seedy and they weren't attracting people into them just because they didn't look very good. So what he did was he sold off some of the more lucrative properties, and he amassed some cash that he could use to spruce up the stores that were needing to be upgraded. Except that when the cash was amassed, the board decided to use it to pay dividends to the shareholders. And you'll remember that when the bankruptcy proceedings were first contemplated, the initial step was to close some of the stores and to lay off nearly 3,000 workers without severance pay, at the same time as they gave bonuses to the officers who had managed the demise of the company. And when the company closes completely, there'd be another 12,000 laid off employees joining them. Many of these employees have given decades of loyalty and service to the company and will come away minus many of the benefits and supports that they had been promised over the years for that loyal service. I understand the same thing is beginning to happen with the Hudson Bay Company. That some of the shareholders are starting to complain that they're not being rewarded for their investments and demanding that the Bay sell off some of the very valuable properties to increase dividends. So the story may be repeated. I feel like something's not right in that. When I was younger, I had the feeling that people who had great talents and gifts were expected to use those great talents and gifts for the good of all. Now there's a word that's current that wasn't even a word that was that I heard when I was younger, and it's the term entitlement. It's a word that was not even coined when I was younger, as I said, but it's a familiar one now. Especially we're hearing it these days around all of the sexual harassment charges that are coming against wealthy old men. I can say that because I'm old, but I'm not wealthy. Wealthy old men who seem to feel that the successes they've had with life, the gifts that they've got that they've used well, give them some kind of license to do what they want to do, and take advantage of whoever they want to take advantage of, rather than acting responsibly. More and more, those who are greatly gifted seem to want to see that as a basis for reward rather than for responsibility. And the gap between wealthy and ordinary people in our society continues to widen. In our society today, it seems like the parable of the landowner and the parable of the talents show the great disparity between how gifts and talents are seen in the kingdom and how they're exercised in our society. I don't know how we're ever going to get from this place to that kingdom place that Jesus talked about. But surely the parables remind us of what life is supposed to be like in the world of God's creation. At the same time, we need to be reminded of the personal lessons that can be mined from this parable of the talents. The sheer joy of living comes when we use the gifts we have been given. Some preachers still warn of the sacrifices that we must make if we choose to be followers of Jesus. I feel that the greater sacrifice to ourselves comes in the situation like that of the third servant. That life is greatly reduced when we fail to use all the gifts and talents that each of us have been given. When we bury them, life is so much less than it could be. We sacrifice so much when we don't use what we've been given well. Many years ago in Trinity in Vernon, we offered a study called Spirit-Given Gifts. Participants answered a questionnaire about what they loved to do, what activities brought a sense of meaning to their lives, how they felt a sense of service to others. The answers were clustered around various talents and gifts, and the person then had a sense of what that Spirit-given gift might be that they had. At the time I filled out the questionnaire because I was nearing retirement and wondered where I might next put my energies. And I found that the answers that I got out of it were very helpful at helping me to focus on what I wanted to do with my time, for the benefit of myself and in the process for the benefit of others. One of the men of the congregation, when he participated in the study, came out with a Spirit-given gift of assisting. He had been given the gift of assisting leaders to accomplish their goals. I remember very clearly, for each of the Spirit-given gifts, there were a couple or three Bible characters that were named who had that Spirit-given gift, so that if you were trying to figure out how you might use that gift, you could go back and read the scriptures and find out how those people in the Bible use those gifts. For the gift of assisting, the biblical people named were Shiphrah and Puah. I never heard of these people, he said. Shiphrah and Puah. If you haven't got the sermon there with you so you can read the answer, who are Shiphrah and Puah?
I know.
Anybody know?
Well, they helped the Pharaoh's daughter take Moses out of the river.
Shiphrah and Puah were the midwives who refused to kill Moses when he was born. Pharaoh's dictum had been that all the boys who were born had to be slaughtered because he didn't want a leader for the Jewish people. And so the midwives were charged with killing the babies, and Shiphrah and Puah were part of that. Good for you for remembering the context of it. the names stuck with me because they're quite strange biblical names. But anyway, he said, I don't know who these people are. And we said, of course you don't, because they're assistants. The point was that his spirit-given gift was assisting, and when he did that, he might be fulfilled and happy, but he would likely not be greatly remembered or honored by others because he was always in the background. But that didn't matter to him. In fact, he said, I like having this identified with me, for me as a spirit-given gift, because the thing I like doing is helping others. And the problem is, when I do a good job of helping others, then people say, well, you do such a good job of helping. I want you to take this over and do this. And when they ask me to take it over, I do a terrible job and I hate it. So now that I know my spirit-given gift is helping, I'm going to resist all of the encouragement to do something else with it. Lorraine was the activist in our family. She was always organizing stuff like bringing refugees to Canada or going to Romania to care for babies. I was the thinker, the talker. I believe that I did have a role in helping her to figure out what she needed to do, but she was the one who did it, and I was always in the background. But when she died, I mourned the fact that all of her skills in organizing and doing those things would be lost. And I kept feeling the need to do some of that so that her legacy would be carried on. But as I thought about it, I realized, if I did that, it wouldn't be me. And I wouldn't do the kind of job that she did. And I would probably also neglect whatever my gifts were. So it's taken me a long time, but I've come to the terms with the reality that her gifts and talents have been lost now that she is gone. And I could never bring them back even if I tried. But if I tried, I might end up losing my gifts and talents as well. And so I need to do what I feel called to do. You need to do what you feel called to do, whatever it is. And not to feel like I should do that because that's much more important than mine. Every one of those gifts is important. An older participant in the Spirit Giving Gifts workshop came up with the gift of being a mentor. I don't know what that means, she said. What's a mentor? Somebody who helps other people, who encourages them, who supports them, who maybe gives them tips about how they can use their Spirit-given gifts. Well, I'm not that. Of course you are, everybody answered. You're always doing that. You're always giving help to somebody else. But I don't do anything, she said. You don't have to do anything. You just have to be yourself. Then you give the gift that you have to give. It was helpful for her to have her gift confirmed by others. In fact, she wouldn't even have figured it out without the confirmation of those around her. And I just want to say that sometimes having your gift confirmed, or sometimes not confirmed, is kind of important. Sometimes we think we have a gift, and it's hard to hear that maybe that isn't our gift and something else is. I remember the story that was given by Mary Cosby. She was a wonderful southern U.S. lady who was the wife of a very famous minister, but a great speaker in her own right. And I was at a conference in Vancouver where she was speaking about spirit-given gifts, and she was talking about having your gifts confirmed by others. And she said when she was a little girl in her Southern Baptist congregation, there was a woman in the congregation who felt herself called to be the soprano soloist in the congregation. She said there was nobody else in the congregation who could confirm that call. And she said there's nothing worse than an unconfirmed soprano soloist. But you know, sometimes when we think we have a gift, and when somebody suggests that that isn't where they see our talents, they see it somewhere else, that's helpful in getting us to redirect our thoughts and our feelings. Or sometimes, like in the case of that elderly lady in Trinity, having that gift confirmed when you're not even sure it's yours can be a real help in getting you to use that gift with satisfaction and with courage. Every life is of equal value, even though the gifts and talents we have received vary widely and are not equal at all. I'm afraid that in our society today, many gifts are used, abused, and thrown aside. That's why it's so important to remember this parable. It reminds us that the pleasure we receive when we use our gifts wisely for the sake of others is a reward in itself, and a reminder that we are honored where it really matters, in God's kingdom. Let's have a few moments of silent reflection on what we've heard and how it speaks to us.